When you hear the term Goth, what is it that comes to your mind? When I think of the term Goth, I think of different things. For once, of course, I am thinking of Gothic literature that emerged in the 18th century and that I'm talking about on this channel a lot. That covers books such as Dracula and Frankenstein, some of the most iconic works ever to be written. But I am also thinking of the subculture that emerged from the post-punk music in the 1980s. Of course, I am also thinking of the fashion and makeup styles that emerged from Goth and that I also like to wear in my everyday life. But I am also thinking of the Gothic architecture that you know from churches and cathedrals that are very famous. And another thing that you could be thinking about are the Germanic tribes that challenged the Roman Empire in antiquity. And you can also think of the Gothic language that even inspired Tolkien himself. In this video, we want to uncover the different layers of the term Gothic together. We want to start with the origins of the word itself. Where did Goth come from, and how did it come to represent such a rich spectrum of meanings? Next, we will dive into the history of the Gothic tribes, the people who gave rise to the term and whose influence spreads across early Europe. We will explore their language, an ancient Germanic tongue that vanished over 1,000 years ago, yet remains one of the most fascinating early records we have. Then we will move on to Gothic architecture, those towering, intricate structures that defined medieval Europe and stood as a symbol of faith, mystery, and the sublime. And we can't talk about Goth without diving into Gothic literature, the genre that gave us unforgettable tales of haunted castles, forbidden romances, and a fascination with the supernatural. From Frankenstein to Dracula, Gothic literature brought an entirely new way to explore fear and beauty. And finally, we will see how Goth evolved into a genre of music, emerging from post-punk and developing into darker, atmospheric sounds that define the Goth rock. And of course, we will dive into Gothic fashion and the iconic different styles that emerged from it. So if you're ready to journey through one of the most fascinating words in our language, let us dive in and discover what it really means to be Goth. So let's get started with the term Goth. It has a rich history evolving over centuries from its ancient origins to the complex meanings it carries today. Originally, Goth referred to a powerful Germanic tribe, the Goths, who played a significant role in shaping the history of early Europe. First recorded by Roman historians in the 3rd century AD, the Goths were often mentioned in connection with their encounters with the Roman Empire. The name itself likely comes from the Gothic word Gutpida or Gutens, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, meaning people of the Goth or simply the Goth. And they were known by variations of this name across different regions. In its early usage, Gothic described a specific tribal identity, representing the people eventually split into two major branches: Visigoth, who settled in Spain, and the Ostrogoth, who established a kingdom in Italy. Throughout late antiquity, the term Goth was closely associated with these people, their language and their achievements, including their role in the decline of the Western Roman Empire and the formation of early medieval European states. However, over time, as the Gothic kingdoms in Italy and Spain dissolved, the original meaning of Goth began to fade. By the Renaissance, when classical knowledge was rediscovered and celebrated, anything seen as anti-classical or anti-Roman was often labeled Gothic, drawing on stereotypes of the Goths as the barbarian invaders who helped bring down Rome. Scholars of the Renaissance who admired Roman architecture began to use Gothic pejoratively to describe the medieval art and architecture of Europe. To them, Gothic became synonymous with what they saw as dark, crude and medieval, essentially the opposite of the clean, symmetrical lines of Roman and Greek style. This Renaissance use of Gothic set the stage for later shifts in meaning. By the 18th and 19th centuries, during the Romantic era, Gothic took on new life, especially in literature and architecture. Writers like Horace Walpole and Mary Shelley revived the term to describe a genre of literature that explored dark, mysterious and supernatural themes. Gothic novels such as Frankenstein and The Castle of Otranto tapped into fascination with horror and the sublime, and the term Gothic became associated with haunted castles, wild landscapes and psychological depth. Gothic architecture, too, experienced a revival, with Victorian architects embracing medieval-inspired designs that celebrated the intricate, ornate and often eerie elements of Gothic cathedrals and streets. In the late 20th century, Goth shifted once more, this time to describe a subculture born out of the punk music scene of the 1970s and 80s. Musicians like Siouxsie and the Banshees and Bauhaus pioneered a sound and aesthetic that was dark, moody and atmospheric, embracing themes of mortality, mysticism and emotional depth. The Goth subculture that grew from this music embraced a distinct style, characterized by dark clothing, dramatic makeup and an appreciation for the macabre and the poetic. Today, Goth refers as much to a cultural aesthetic as it does to a musical genre or a fashion style. In tracing the history of Goth as a term, we see how it was once associated with an ancient tribe, transformed through various eras, becoming first a symbol of medieval Europe's contrast to classical antiquity, then a literary and architectural style, and finally a modern cultural identity. Each shift reflects changing attitudes towards history, art and self-expression, showing the remarkable journey of a term that has managed to adapt to different meanings over nearly 2 millennia. Let us now turn to the Goth as a tribe. In the shifting world of ancient Europe, one group of people left an indelible mark on history: the Goth. Instrumental in the fall of the Western Roman Empire, the Goth helped shape the medieval world that followed. First mentioned by Greco-Roman writers in the 3rd century AD, the Goths originally inhabited lands north of the Danube in areas that are now part of Ukraine, Moldavia and Romania. By the late 4th century, this Gothic homeland was thrown into turmoil. The westward movements of the Alans and the fierce Huns disrupted their territories in present-day Ukraine. Pressured by these powerful invaders, many Goths gathered along the Roman border at the lower Danube, seeking refuge within the empire. Once inside Roman territory, tensions quickly escalated. In 378 AD, these tensions culminated in one of history's most pivotal confrontations, the Battle of Adrianople. In a stunning turn, the Goth-led forces defeated the Roman army, forever altering the balance of power. After Adrianople, many Goths and other eastern tribes settled within or near the empire's borders. The Visigoths, initially led by King Alaric I, went on to establish the Visigothic kingdom in Toledo, Spain. Meanwhile, Goths who had been under Hunnic domination regained independence in the 5th century, becoming the Ostrogoths. The Goths would go on to form 2 powerful kingdoms that played a defining role in medieval Europe. The Ostrogoths, under their great leader King Theodoric, established a kingdom in Ravenna in Italy. Theodoric's rule marked a time of peace and prosperity as he sought to unify his Gothic subjects with the Roman population, preserving Roman architectural heritage and legal traditions. Meanwhile, in Spain, the Visigoths founded a kingdom that flourished for nearly 3 centuries, blending Gothic and Roman influences into a unique hybrid culture. Yet these kingdoms would not last forever. In the 6th century, the Eastern Roman Empire under Emperor Justinian waged war against the Ostrogoths, eventually leading to the fall of the Ostrogothic kingdom. And in the early 8th century, the Visigoth kingdom was mostly conquered by the Umayyad Caliphate, although a small Gothic stronghold in Asturias survived. This remnant would go on to relaunch the Reconquista, the long struggle to reclaim Iberian lands from Muslim rule led by Pelagius. But the Goths left more than just kingdoms behind. As a people, they spoke Gothic and East Germanic language with roots tracing back to Proto-Germanic, a common ancestor shared by English, German and Dutch. The Goths were known not only as fierce warriors but also as people with a deep social structure, a respect for law and a strong sense of kinship. Skilled in cavalry combat, the Goths combined traditional tribal practices with advanced military tactics. Their kings, like Theodoric, were celebrated for their wisdom and ability to unify diverse groups, earning loyalty through both strength and diplomacy. While the Visigoths and Ostrogoths ultimately faded into history, traces of the Gothic people endured. Isolated Gothic communities in Crimea, known as the Crimean Goths, preserved a distinct culture and language for over a millennium. However, by the time medieval Europe took shape, the Goths had gradually ceased to exist as a separate people. Still, their legacy lives on. The Goths bridged the gap between the ancient and medieval worlds, setting the stage for the dynamic changes and cultural fusions that defined Europe's future. Let us now explore the Gothic language. What makes it special is that it is the oldest documented Germanic language, predating Old English, Old Norse and Old High German by centuries. The Gothic language belonged to the East Germanic branch of the Germanic language family, related to languages like German, Dutch and English, though it took a unique path. Gothic emerged among the Goths, a tribal people who originally migrated from Scandinavia to Eastern Europe, as you've heard before. Over centuries, they spread across the continent, reaching as far as the Mediterranean and North Africa. Unlike other Germanic languages, which we mostly know from medieval Europe, the earliest documentation of Gothic comes from a remarkable manuscript, the Codex Argenteus, or Silver Bible, written in the 6th century. The Codex Argenteus is a dazzling artifact and the main source of what we know about Gothic. It's a translation of the Bible from Greek into Gothic, commissioned by the Gothic bishop Ulfilas or Ulfilas in the 4th century. Ulfilas wasn't just translating, he had to invent an entire Gothic alphabet to capture the sounds of his language. He adapted letters from Greek, with a few Latin and runic characters added in, to create the Gothic script. Because of Ulfilas' efforts, we have a written record of Gothic that has survived across the centuries, a rare feat for a language that became extinct around the 8th century. Unlike other alphabets of the time, the Gothic alphabet wasn't just borrowed from Greek or Latin, it was adapted to Gothic-specific sounds, capturing the language's character and nuance. But Gothic's lifespan as a spoken language was short-lived. As the Goths moved through Europe, they came into contact with other languages and cultures. In the West, their interactions with the Roman Empire and later the Frankish and Byzantine empires led them to gradually adopt other languages like Latin and Greek. By the early Middle Ages, Gothic was already fading. In Visigothic Spain, Latin had become dominant, while the Ostrogothic communities in Italy assimilated with other groups. Remarkably, traces of Gothic did survive in the remote mountains of Crimea until the 16th century, giving us the last echoes of a once widespread language. So why should we care about Gothic today? First, it's the oldest documented Germanic language, providing a direct link to Proto-Germanic, the shared ancestor of languages like English, German, and even modern Scandinavian languages. Studying Gothic reveals insights into how these languages evolved and split off from each other. The Gothic language also offers a unique view of early European Christianity and the ways in which the Goths adopted, interpreted, and spread their faith. This combination of linguistic and cultural history makes Gothic essential for understanding early medieval Europe. And further than that, if you're a Tolkien fan, then you might also be interested in the Gothic language. as Tolkien drew inspiration from studying the Gothic language for inventing his own languages for his fictional worlds, and he even wrote a poem in the Gothic language called Bagme Bluma, or in English, Flower of the Trees, which was published in 1936 and which you can read more about online. So now, as we have discussed the German tribe called Goth and the Gothic language, we want to go into the Middle Ages and talk about the architecture style. Gothic architecture is a style that emerged in Europe during the High and Late Middle Ages, starting in the mid-12th century in France and spreading throughout Europe. It evolved from Romanesque architecture and was primarily used in cathedrals, churches, as you see behind me, and other significant religious buildings. Gothic architecture is characterized by its emphasis on heat, light, and intricate detail, aiming to create an ethereal and awe-inspiring atmosphere. It remained the dominant architectural style until the 16th century, when it gradually gave way to the Renaissance. Behind me you can see the Elisabeth Church in Marburg in Germany, which was completed in the mid-13th century, and it is one of Germany's first purely Gothic churches and a remarkable example of early Gothic architecture outside of France, although it was heavily inspired by the churches in France. To show you some examples of the Gothic architecture and its most remarkable features, I will blend in pictures. Some of them I took myself and some I took from the internet, but I will always write down below what you're seeing. Remarkable features of the Gothic architecture contain the following. Pointed arches. One of the defining elements of Gothic architecture, the pointed arch, replaced the rounded Romanesque arch. This feature allowed for greater heat and helped distribute the weight more efficiently, enabling architects to build taller structures. Secondly, ribbed walls were used to support the roofs of Gothic buildings. Unlike earlier barrel walls, ribbed walls consisted of a framework of ribs or arcs. This design distributed the weight of the ceiling and walls more evenly, enabling the use of thinner walls and larger windows. Thirdly, flying buttresses. These external supports are one of the most iconic features of Gothic cathedrals. Flying buttresses transfer the weight of the roof and upper walls outward to external supports, which allowed for the walls themselves to be lighter and filled with windows, thus creating large expanses for stained glass. And fourthly, the stained glass windows. Gothic architecture is known for its extensive use of stained glass, especially in the form of large rose windows and tall, narrow lancet windows. These windows allowed natural light to fill the interior spaces with vibrant colors and illustrated biblical scenes, saints, and other religious iconography. Fifth, the verticality is a very important characteristic of Gothic architecture. Buildings seem to soar upward with features like tall spires, towers, and pinnacles. This vertical emphasis was intended to direct one's eye and thoughts towards heaven, reinforcing the spiritual experience. Sixth, the ornate detailing. Gothic structures are known for their detailed ornamentation, including elaborate stone carvings, gargoyles, and decorative tracery. Carvings often included religious scenes, mythical creatures, and intricate floral patterns. Gargoyles in particular served both decorative and functional purposes, often acting as water spouts to tunnel rainwater away from the building. Seventh, the rose windows. Large, circular stained glass windows, often placed at the western front or in the transepts of cathedrals, were another hallmark of Gothic architecture. These windows are richly decorated and often represent scenes from the Last Judgment, the Virgin Mary, or other religious themes. Eighth, clustered columns. In Gothic cathedrals, columns were often composed of clusters of thinner columns bundled together. This allowed for greater structural support and contributed to the overall slender, elegant appearance of the interior. So, in summary, Gothic architecture is characterized by its emphasis on light, heat, and intricate design, producing a sense of verticality and spiritual transcendence in the space it creates. Its use of new engineering techniques allowed for the creation of larger windows, taller structures, and more ornate decorative elements than earlier styles. But the Gothic architecture didn't end in the 16th century. Actually, it was revived through the movement that was actually called the Gothic Revival, the neo-Gothic architectural style that emerged in the late 18th century and continued into the 19th century. It marked a significant resurgence of Gothic architecture within the context of the neoclassical architecture. The movement arose as a reaction against the rigid forms and symmetry of neoclassicalism, celebrating instead the intricate details, verticality, and ornate features characteristic of the medieval Gothic structures. The revival also had a profound connection to literature, particularly with the rise of the Gothic novel in the late 18th and early 19th century. And this is how you see the connection, because it almost developed in the same time. So the first neo-Gothic churches were built in the 17th, 18th century, but only around 1830 was the breakthrough of these churches, and the literature was emerging from the late 18th century with the beginning of the Horace Walpole's Castle of Otranto, which was considered the first Gothic story. And Horace Walpole was building the Strawberry Hill House. I will blend in a picture. It was his mansion that he was building over several years to look like a Gothic castle or a Gothic building, which is quite interesting because you can really see many of the details, and it was one of the first neo-Gothic architectural buildings. And here you can see a very nice connection how the Gothic literature and the Gothic architecture, or the neo-Gothic architecture to be precise, developed in the same time span and also in the same direction. So the same people even eventually had an influence on that, such as Horace Walpole. And this is how we will get to our next chapter, which will be about Gothic literature. Next up, we want to talk about my favorite layer of meaning of the term Gothic, which is the referring to Gothic literature. If you've been around in this channel for a while, you might have watched one or two videos about Gothic or Romantic literature. And if not, and you're interested, for a little bit more depth and overview, I will link a video about the origins of Gothic fiction up here. Yet I will also give you a short overview of the emergence of Gothic literature and the key characteristics, and also mention some of the most important works of Gothic literature. So, what do you have to know about Gothic literature? It is a genre of fiction that emerged in the late 18th century. It is characterized by its focus on dark, mysterious, and supernatural elements. The term Gothic refers to its inspiration from medieval architecture and settings, particularly gloomy castles, monasteries, and ruins, which evoke a sense of foreboding. This literary style often explores the psychological and emotional landscapes of fear, horror, and the uncanny. Gothic literature began with Horace Walpole's novel The Castle of Otranto from 1764, which is widely considered the first Gothic novel or Gothic story. It became popular in England during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, particularly with authors like Anne Radcliffe, Mary Shelley, and Edgar Allan Poe, and later expanded to other regions and languages. It was closely related to Romanticism, as both movements emphasized emotion, nature, and the sublime, but Gothic literature took these elements into darker, more terrifying directions. There are a few characteristic features of Gothic fiction that I will mention now. First, it also often has a dark and atmospheric setting. They are often set in gloomy, decaying environments that evoke a sense of dread and mystery. These settings include ancient castles or mansions, monasteries or convents, ruins or graveyards, or isolated remote landscapes such as forests, mountains, cliffs, or moors. The architecture often mirrors the decaying state of the characters' minds or the moral collapse of society. Secondly, supernatural elements. Gothic literature frequently features supernatural occurrences, though sometimes these are explained by the end of the story as natural events. Common supernatural elements include ghosts or apparitions, vampires, werewolves or other monstrous creatures, curses or hauntings, or mysterious, unexplained phenomena. In some stories, the line between reality and the supernatural is blurred, contributing to the atmosphere of suspense and uncertainty. Thirdly, Gothic novels often have emotionally intense characters. They often experience heightened emotions such as fear, paranoia, and obsession. The characters tend to be psychologically complex, with dark, hidden desires or traumas. The emotional extremes are often portrayed as a result of the oppressive, mysterious environment they inhabit. Common types of characters include the Byronic hero, a brooding, flawed, and often tormented anti-hero inspired by Lord Byron. The damsel in distress, a vulnerable female character who is threatened by some malevolent force. The villain, often charismatic and powerful but driven by dark and immoral motives. And the madman, characters driven insane by guilt, obsession, or supernatural forces. Fourth, themes of madness and the uncanny. Gothic literature explores the boundaries between sanity and madness, often leading characters and sometimes the reader to question reality. The uncanny, which refers to something familiar yet eerie or disturbing, is a central theme. The exploration of psychological horror adds depth to the physical horrors of the story. Fifth, the sublime. The sublime in Gothic literature refers to the mixture of awe and terror inspired by nature or architecture. Vast, imposing landscapes, stormy seas, rugged mountains, or towering forests are common backdrops for Gothic tales. The settings often reflect the inner turmoil of the characters or symbolize their struggles. Sixth, mystery and suspense. Gothic novels are known for their intricate, mysterious plots. Secrets, hidden pasts, and mysterious occurrences keep readers on edge. The suspense is often heightened by unexpected twists, revelations, or dangerous encounters. The narrative builds tension as characters unravel the mysteries of their circumstances. Seventh, a focus on death and decay. Themes of death, decay, and mortality are central to Gothic literature. The atmosphere is often morbid with descriptions of decrepit buildings, dying landscapes, or decaying bodies. The fear of death or the afterlife, along with an obsession with the past, plays a significant role in many Gothic tales. Eighth, duality and inner conflict. Gothic literature often explores duality, particularly the conflict between good and evil within individuals. Characters may harbor hidden secrets, and stories often delve into the theme of the double or doppelganger. This theme of inner conflict is seen in classics like Robert Louis Stevenson's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde from 1886. Ninth, isolation and entrapment. Characters in Gothic novels are often physically or emotionally isolated. This isolation could be due to their remote settings or their psychological state. Entrapment is another common theme, whether literal, imprisonment in a castle for instance, or figurative, being trapped by guilt, fear, or social circumstances. Some key works of Gothic literature include the following. First, The Castle of Otranto from 1764 by Horace Walpole, the first Gothic story featuring a haunted castle, a prophecy, and supernatural occurrences. Secondly, Frankenstein from 1818 by Mary Shelley, a foundational Gothic novel combining science fiction and horror, centered on themes of creation, isolation, and monstrosity. Thirdly, The Mysteries of Udolpho from 1794 by Anne Radcliffe, which is known for its eerie atmospheres and exemplifies Radcliffe's use of psychological terror and sublime landscapes. Fourth, Dracula from 1897 by Bram Stoker, a definitive Gothic horror novel about the vampire Count Dracula, merging fear of the supernatural with themes of seduction and immortality. Fifth, The Fall of the House of Usher from 1847 by Edgar Allan Poe. Although often considered a work of romantic fiction, its dark, brooding atmospheres and themes of revenge and passion align with Gothic conventions. Gothic literature is marked by its fascination with the dark and the unknown, often blending horror, romance, and the supernatural to explore deeper psychological and emotional themes. Through its evocative settings, intense characters, and use of mystery and the uncanny, Gothic literature continues to influence horror, thriller, and fantasy genres until today. Goth music is often referred to as Gothic rock or simply Goth, and it is a genre that emerged from the post-punk movement in the late 1970s and early 1980s, as I said before. It is characterized by dark atmospheric sounds, melancholic or introspective lyrics, and themes of mystery, death, romanticism, and the supernatural. The genre is deeply connected to the broader Gothic subculture, influencing its fashion, literature, and aesthetics. So Goth music has its root in post-punk, a genre that developed in the late 1970s as bands moved away from the raw, aggressive energy of punk rock toward more experimental, introspective sounds. Several of those post-punk bands began exploring darker, moodier themes, laying the foundation for what would become Gothic. Some of the key early influences on Goth music include punk rock for its DIY attitude and rebelliousness, glam rock for its theatricality and dark romantic edge as seen in artists like David Bowie, art rock and avant-garde music for their experimentation with sound and new mood. Characteristic features of Goth music are the following. The dark atmospheric sound for one. Goth music is known for its brooding atmospheric tone. Many bands use a combination of deep bass lines, reverb-heavy guitar riffs, and ethereal synth to create a haunting, immersive soundscape. While not all Goth bands sound the same, many incorporate slow, melancholic melodies with haunting, echoing vocals. Secondly, melancholic and introspective lyrics. Lyrically, Gothic rock often explores themes of existential angst, loss, romantic despair, isolation, and death. The lyrics are often poetic, drawing on the literary, historical, and mythological references. The sense of longing and emotional depth is a key element of the music, with some bands focusing on romanticism and others on a more nihilistic worldview. Thirdly, the use of minor keys. Many Gothic songs are composed in minor keys, which contribute to the dark, melancholic, and eerie atmosphere associated with the genre. Fourth, the post-punk rhythms. The driving, often repetitive drum beats associated with post-punk, sometimes played by drum machines, are a key element of Goth music. These rhythms can be either fast and danceable as in early Gothic rock, or slow and plodding in more melancholic tracks. Fourth, theatrical and emotional vocals. Vocals in Goth music range from deep, baritone voices like those of Peter Murphy from Bauhaus or Andrew Eldridge from the Sisters of Mercy, to ethereal, haunting female vocals, as in the music of Siouxsie Sioux or the Cocteau Twins' Liz Fraser. The delivery is often dramatic, with singers employing an emotive style that adds to the mood of the music. Over time, Goth music has splintered into several subgenres and styles, each with its own unique sound, but still rooted in the core themes of darkness, introspection, and mystery. Gothic rock is the original form of Goth music that emerged from post-punk, featuring a mix of dark, moody atmospheres and rock instrumentation. Key bands include Bauhaus, often credited with pioneering Gothic rock with their 1979 single Bela Lugosi's Dead. Their music blends eerie vocals, dark lyrics, and minimalist post-punk soundscapes. Siouxsie and the Banshees. Siouxsie Sioux's ethereal vocals and the band's blend of punk, post-punk, and dark romantic imagery were highly influential. The Sisters of Mercy, known for their driving drum machines, deep vocals, and heavy bass lines, they helped define the goth sound in the 1980s. The Cure, initially a post-punk band, The Cure developed a darker, more melancholic sound with albums like Faith and Pornography becoming a cornerstone of the genre. Secondly, dark wave. Dark wave is a subgenre that combines the dark, introspective qualities of goth music with elements of electronic music, often incorporating synthesizers and drum machines. The sound is atmospheric and moody, but less rock-oriented. Key bands are Clan of Simox, Dead Can Dance, and The Frozen Autumn. Thirdly, ethereal wave. Ethereal wave is a subgenre of Gothic music that emphasizes dreamy, atmospheric soundscapes and haunting, often angelic vocals, particularly from female singers. It has a lighter, more ethereal sound compared to traditional Gothic rock. Key bands are Cocteau Twins, This Mortal Coil, and Likia. Fourth, death rock. Death rock is a fusion of goth and punk music with a raw, aggressive sound and a DIY attitude. It is characterized by fast-paced rhythms, distorted guitars, and horror punk aesthetics. Death rock originated in the US goth scene, particularly in Los Angeles in the early 1980s. Key bands are Christian Death, 45 Grave, and Super Heroines. Fifth, industrial goth. Industrial music became intertwined with goth in the late 1980s and 1990s, creating a hybrid genre that combines goth's dark, atmospheric sound with the harsh, mechanical rhythms of industrial music. Key bands are Nine Inch Nails, Ministry, and Skinny Puppy. Sixth, gothic metal, a subgenre that blends the dark, romantic themes of gothic music with the heavy, distorted sound of metal. Gothic metal often features both growling male vocals and operatic female vocals, creating a contrast between beauty and darkness. Key bands are Type O Negative, Lacuna Coil, Theatre of Tragedy, and Paradise Lost. Seventh, cold wave. Cold wave emerged in France and is related to post-punk and dark wave, but with a more minimal, detached, and colder sound, focusing on repetitive beats and melancholic synth. Key bands are Asylum Party, Trisomie 21, Cast Product. Now I want to mention some key bands and also play short examples of each of them, because if you hear the sound you might be reminded that you know them, or even maybe you're a fan. So just to give you an impression. Firstly, Bauhaus. Often hailed as the first true goth band, Bauhaus' dark theatrical style and haunting sound laid the foundation for Gothic rock. And I want to play a short clip of their 1979 song Bela Lugosi's Dead.
Lugosi's dead. Bela Lugosi's dead. Undead, undead, undead.
Secondly, my favorite band, Siouxsie and the Banshees. Fronted by Siouxsie Sioux, the band played a key role in shaping the goth aesthetic. And Siouxsie Sioux herself looks like the most iconic goth you can imagine. Their mix of punk attitude, haunting melodies, and dark romantic lyrics made them iconic in the scene.
Have no choice, following the footsteps of a red dawn, not your choice. Spellbound, following the footsteps of a red dawn, not your choice. Spellbound.
Thirdly, The Cure, whose sound is also very iconic. Although The Cure's music spans several genres, their early albums such as 17 Seconds and Pornography are goth milestones, filled with melancholic lyrics, deep bass lines, and eerie atmospheres. Fourthly, the Sisters of Mercy. Their dark, commanding presence, deep vocals, and hypnotic drum machine beats made them one of the most influential goth bands of the 1980s. Tracks like The Corrosion and Lucretia My Reflection are goth classics. Goth music has had a lasting influence on various genres, from metal, especially gothic and doom metal, to dark wave, industrial, and even electronic music. The themes of melancholy, the supernatural, and existential angst found in goth music resonate across many genres of alternative and underground music. Today, the goth scene continues to evolve, with bands blending traditional gothic sound with modern elements, ensuring that the genre remains both timeless and adaptable, and the songs are still played in many alternative parties and clubs. Next up, we want to talk about Gothic fashion. And I first want to talk about the origins of Gothic fashion, which is closely related to the origins of Gothic music. So, as I told you, the Goth subculture emerged in England during the post-punk era as young people who were drawn to the dark, melancholic tones of Gothic rock began to express their aesthetic through fashion. Early Goth fashion was influenced by first punk fashion with its rebellious DIY elements, leather and studs. Second, Victorian mourning attire, heavy black fabrics, lace, corsets and long skirts. Romantic and medieval aesthetics like billowing sleeves, high collars and flowing garments. And Gothic literature and horror cinema as well, drawing from images of vampires, witches and macabre settings. The emphasis on black clothing, dramatic makeup and distinctive hairstyles quickly became trademarks of the goth scene, and over time the style diversified into several substyles. Key elements of Gothic fashion are the following. First and foremost, the dark clothing. The most recognizable feature of Gothic fashion is the use of black as the dominant color, although other dark hues like deep purple, dark red, and midnight blue or green are also common. Black is often used as a symbol of mystery, mourning, and rebellion. Secondly, Victorian and medieval influences. Many Gothic styles incorporate elements from historical fashion, particularly Victorian and medieval periods. This can include lace-up corsets, ruffled blouses, long flowing skirts, high collars, velvet jackets, and intricate lace details. Thirdly, accessoires. Accessoires play a major role in Gothic fashion. They often include chokers, cuffs, and jewelry made of silver, blackened metals, or featuring motifs like crosses, bats, skulls, and spiders. Fishnet stockings or gloves are commonly worn to add a textural element. Platform boots or pointed shoes are also popular footwear choices. Parasols, canes, and hats are common in more Victorian-inspired styles. And the hairstyle and makeup. Hairstyles are often dramatic, ranging from teased, voluminous hair to sleek, straight styles dyed black or other dark colors. Some goths also incorporate unusual hair colors like electric blue or blood red. Makeup often includes pale foundation to give a ghostly appearance, dark eyeliner and eyeshadow emphasizing the eyes with a smoky or bold look, black or deep colored lips or also reds or purple to create a striking contrast with the pale skin, and my makeup today is quite an example of typical traditional Gothic makeup. They also have religious and occult symbols. Gothic fashion sometimes incorporates religious and occult imagery with crosses, ankhs, pentagrams, and other symbols appearing in jewelry, clothing, prints, or accessoires. These symbols often serve as expressions of individuality or rebellion, though they can also have personal or spiritual significance to the wearer. Over time, Gothic fashion has diversified into various sub-styles, each with its unique blend of influences, aesthetics and motifs. Some of the most notable Gothic fashion styles include the following. First, the traditional Goth, also called trad Goth. It is characterized by a dark, romantic aesthetic. And key elements include long black dresses or skirts, lace, velvet fabrics, corsets and band t-shirts, chunky boots or elegant lace-up shoes, silver jewelry, chokers and symbols like skulls or crosses, pale foundation, dark eyeliner and bold black or dark red lipstick. The style often emphasizes dramatic eye makeup with smoky shadows or winged liner. Secondly, the Victorian Goth. Victorian Goth draws, as its name says, inspiration from the Victorian era, blending romanticism with a darker edge. Its features include long flowing skirts, high-collared blouses, waistcoats and top hats for men. Fabrics are often rich and textured. Victorian-style boots are often heeled and made from leather. Parasols, lace gloves and intricate brooches make up for great accessoires. For makeup, Victorian Goths like to wear pale skin with a focus on rosy cheeks, dark eyeliner and deep berry or wine-colored lips. Sometimes subtle touches of shimmer are added to evoke a ghostly appearance. Third, the Industrial Goth. Industrial Goth is influenced by the industrial music scene and is more edgy and urban. Key elements include black leather, fishnets, cargo pants and industrial-themed graphic tees. Often incorporates elements of fetish fashion as well. Heavy-duty boots, combat boots or platform shoes are typical footwear. Chains, spikes, goggles and harnesses make for the accessoires. For makeup, they wear bold eyeliner, heavy use of black, metallic colors, and body art like tattoos and piercings. Often features dark, grungy lipstick like black or dark grey. Fourth is the Cybergoth, which is also a very distinctive and iconic, colorful style. It merges the Gothic aesthetic with futuristic elements and influences from the rave culture. Its standout features include bright neon colors, synthetic fabrics and layered outfits, often incorporating mesh and PVC materials. Footwear is platform boots or brightly colored sneakers. Accessoires can be LED lights, cyber accessoires like goggles and oversized jewelry. Makeup is made up of neon colors, glitter and elaborate designs, often featuring bright eyeliner and bold lip colors. The look can include face paint or artistic patterns to emphasize the futuristic vibe. Next up is the Romantic Goth. It focuses on elegance and femininity and often takes inspiration from classic literature and art. Key features include flowing ethereal fabrics like chiffon and satin, long dresses with lace details and draped capes, delicate boots or heels with intricate designs, floral crowns, ornate jewelry and vintage handbags, soft, dreamy makeup tones with a focus on rosy cheeks and natural lips, complemented by dark, dramatic eye makeup. The aim is often to evoke a fairy tale or mythical quality. And the next one is a pastel goth. It combines traditional Gothic elements with soft pastel colors, creating a whimsical and cute look. The features include light-colored skirts or dresses paired with darker tops, oversized sweaters and playful prints. Footwear can be chunky platform shoes or colorful sneakers. Accessoires are cute hair clips, pastel-colored jewelry and plush toys or charms. And makeup is often soft pastel eyeshadow with an emphasis on playful eyeliner designs. Lips are often capped in light pink or lavender and cheeks are highlighted for a fresh, youthful appearance. And the last one I want to mention is the corporate goth, which is a goth aesthetic for everyday life. So normal blouses, blazers, black skirts, black trousers, things you can wear when you go to the office and want to dress in darker colors, in black and also have a little bit of jewelry, but more in a less dramatic way than the other styles. So all of these styles together showcase that there's a rich diversity within Gothic fashion, each allowing for individual expression while maintaining a connection to the overall aesthetic of the Goth subculture, as many elements emerge in different styles as well. Gothic fashion has had a lasting influence on both mainstream and alternative fashion. Designers like Alexander McQueen and John Galliano have incorporated Gothic elements into haute couture, while the aesthetic has also seen a resurgence in streetwear and everyday fashion. Substyles like pastel goth and new goth have made the look more accessible to wider audiences, blending Gothic themes with contemporary trends. Though initially tied to the music of the Goth culture, Gothic fashion has grown beyond its origins, becoming a versatile and continually evolving aesthetic that allows for personal expression while maintaining its core elements of darkness, mystery, and elegance. So, what is Goth eventually? It is a term that has evolved dramatically over the centuries, originating from the Gothic tribes who roamed Europe and played a significant role in the fall of the Western Roman Empire. These ancient warriors were not just conquerors, they were part of a rich tapestry of history that influenced the development of medieval Europe. But the concept of Goth extends far beyond ancient tribes. It encompasses a unique aesthetic and cultural identity that has manifested in various forms throughout history. Gothic literature emerged to explore the complexities of the human experience, weaving tales of horror and beauty that continue to resonate today. The architecture that bears the name Gothic speaks to a time when soaring cathedrals captured the imagination with their intricate designs and spiritual grandeur, reflecting the cultural shifts of a medieval society long after the Goths themselves had faded from memory. And then there's the modern Goth subculture, a vibrant community that embraces individuality through music, fashion, and art. It celebrates the beauty found in darkness and challenges societal norms, creating a space where self-expression reigns supreme. So whether you're drawn to the ancient tales of the Gothic tribes or language, the haunting melodies of Gothic music, Gothic rock, or the striking visuals of Gothic fashion, whether you love Gothic literature or are just a part of the subculture or want to immerse yourself in it, just remember that the essence of Goth is about embracing the depth and complexity of life itself, and also embracing the dark side of everything, the dark side within yourself, and also just accepting ourselves. And I want to end the video on a personal note because I'm myself part of the subculture. And I think many people tend to struggle with the term Goth and whether they can refer to themselves as Goth. And I think there's people who are very strict and say only if you listen to the music and if you're a big fan and stuff, you can call yourself Goth. And I feel like there's nobody who's got the authority over that term, because as you've seen, there's so many different kinds of ways that you can define Goth, and so many sub-styles within the music, within the fashion, within the literature, that when you want to become a Goth yourself, or if you're interested in exploring any facet of what Goth could mean, you're absolutely entitled to do so and to call yourself Goth if you want to, but also try to make an effort to get to know all these things that I've been talking about today, because there's such a rich culture within that. And the great thing about people who consider themselves Goth is that they really let each other be the way they are and just celebrate the individuality instead of trying to put people into conformity and everybody looking the same. Because whenever you go to a place where Goth gather, being at a festival, a party, or any other occasion, maybe a rock concert, you will see that most people are dressed in black, but they are still having their very unique styles. And that's what I love about the subculture, just as an example. as well as the fact that it's such a very rich culture that is still emerging, and especially through social media, it's gaining much more popularity, and it's also becoming part of the mainstream fashion in some ways, and still it's remaining its very unique identity. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for staying until the end. If you enjoyed the video, I invite you to click through my playlist on Gothic and Romantic literature, on fantasy and science fiction literature from antiquity to nowadays, which I'm still working on, about literary theory, especially about hermeneutics, about Japanese literature. So there's quite a lot to see, and maybe you can find something that you're interested in. And if you want, also consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss any further videos. See you in my next video then. Bye bye!